So Neil, this is a solo project recorded mostly in New Zealand.
This is a solo project. I mean, there was a cast of characters, obviously, during the recording of the record, but I started it and finished it on my own. The first 2/3 of the record was recorded in my basement in New Zealand, yeah, and it was a bit of a nebulous process because I built a studio during the course of the beginning of the recording, and so I was recording in different rooms of the house while they were digging underneath, but got to finish it. Actually, it was finished on my birthday last year, May the 27th.
Is it different recording on your own, and how did you know when it was finished?
Well, it's very descriptive of the process of recording the album because I didn't really have a clear agenda when I started, but through a process of exploration and lots of tangents and cups of tea thrown in, the character of the album was defined. Because I was on my own, I didn't start off with a clear path. With a band, you've got certain restrictions which in some ways are comforting. The sound of the band will define the beginning of each song, but I could start with anything I wanted to. It could have been a log drummer or a ukulele or an old octagon keyboard that I have in my basement. That's also slightly scary too because you get an option dilemma then. You can do anything, and so every day is filled with alternatives, especially in modern times when you've got a 24-track tape recorder and a computer, which I had for the first time in this process. You don't have to decide anything at the time. You can delay decision-making indefinitely. So it's exciting on the one hand and also potentially time-wasting and difficult. It's abandoned. The record's always abandoned. Yeah, and I'm always relieved when it comes to mastering because once it's mastered, well actually even then you can still be tweaking and fiddling, but once it's mastered you actually have to decide that that's it. And I'm at that point now, thank God.
Why is Last One Standing the first track on the CD? How do you choose?
Well, I'm not sure that you can actually verbalise the decision in the end because it's just an emotional flow that you're looking for, the way that the songs present themselves and unfold gradually through the album. But that song, I like the fact it started straight in with a vocal. There was no preamble. It's very straightforward, simply arranged, and it's up, and it's got a kind of very positive first chorus for people to hear in an album which has got its darker moments. So, but I'm attracted to the chorus coming out in a key that you're not expecting, or there being a lateral turn at some point in the bridge, or I sort of think that's the mark of character of the song. That's what sets it apart from a sort of paint by numbers kind of approach.
You're known as a great writer of melodies who perhaps has a rocker's character hidden inside. Is that fair?
Yeah, and it normally happens on stage that the songs become more rocking beasts than they were in the studio. And one of these days I'll tour before I record in order to turn that little concept around. But generally speaking, yeah, I like to have moments where there's a sense of abandon in the arrangement. But I'm also attracted to elegance of arrangement, so it's a slightly uneasy mix at times. I think I don't think I've got. I'm not a garage aesthetic at work, but I'm always looking for songs to unleash themselves. As Youth, the producer of Together Alone, used to say, "When you get to the end, man, freak out." Yeah, and I do like a good lively end. Hence the title of the album, Try Whistling This. It's both a humorous remark upon what I do, but for me, it's I'm devoted to a good tune, and I always figure it's the only thing you can carry with you, no matter where you are. You can't carry a rhythm. Well, you can tap a rhythm out, I suppose, but you can't take an image with you, and you can't take an attitude, but you can take a tune, and so I think that's a noble pursuit, and I'll stick to it.
What, if any, relationship does a song have to the writer's own life?
They're another life again. I think they're a kind of part invention, part experience. Part fantasy. Whenever I start a song, there's always a few lines that I can correlate with my life, and the rest of it's expanded upon and enlarged upon and exaggerated for the purposes of giving the singer of the song a presence. And also, I think for me, whenever I realise I've got a song, is the point where I can imagine the space that the song is occupying, a room or a scenario. I managed to keep quite a big distance from it once it's committed to paper or to a tape. I never think about it in terms of describing my life. There's certain lines which resonate from direct experience, but other bits come along and push it into another sphere, I think.
The track Souvenir starts off with strings and guitar. Why?
The arrangement of Souvenir actually came together as much through a jam that my son Liam and I had and he created that drum rhythm, and I later that night wrote the song based around that, and it immediately seemed to have an atmosphere which was in the chords, which wasn't just a straight ahead rock kind of thing, and it deserved a little bit of richness in the tonality. So I immediately put, straight after bass and drums went strings, and they actually appeared before the guitars on that particular one. There are Chamberlain strings. I've got an old Chamberlain in my basement which does a very good job of imitating those buzzsaw, scratchy cellos, that, close mic'd cellos. These are actually tape derived sounds. They're like the Mellotron Chamberlain, and so to my ears anyway, they sound more real, and there's a little bit of wonkiness about them that gives them a more human touch. I think a lot of the digital synthesized, still a lot of the digital samples have a slight coldness to them.
The question of where to live is harder for someone in your line of business. Why New Zealand?
We've basically decided to make New Zealand our home against all logic, really, because in the business I'm in, it would make a lot more sense to be in London, New York or LA. In terms of proximity, every time you jump on a plane and have a 24-hour trip ahead of you, it's pretty intimidating. But somehow the land and the light and the people are deeply familiar to me and important, so it just feels like the right place to be. And there's a certain deep relaxation that comes from being in your place of birth, I think.
Some of the tracks on this album have bits that were recorded in New York with Chad Blake mixing them. Did New York make a difference to the sound?
Yeah, we went to New York in October last year after I'd already done about 2/3 of the record and had got to the point where I was thinking, well, this sounds good, but maybe if I just try tweaking this. And I was dithering a little bit, basically. And also wanted to get a bit of context. When you're working in your basement, it's like you're performing for yourself every day and there's no real context. I wanted to get out and amongst a more energised environment and see whether the songs had the right amount of snap to them. The New York bits just came in over the top of the New Zealand bits, and I think in every case, every time we brought a track up, we energised it. Partially because I found this great bass player called Sebastian Steinberg, who Chad Blake had put me onto. And he plays for a band called Soul Coughing, who are actually very different, make very different music than anything I've done. But he has a great pop sensibility, and managed to put a lot more energy on all the tracks every time he appeared. And they're also deeper and fatter and just, made a big difference.
On the song King Tide, there's a surprise. It starts off quite differently, then you bring the volume up. Crash comes the real level. Wow.
Oh, it's always nice to surprise people, yeah. It is. Well, that song began with the intro, which was a Wurlitzer and a harmonium. Vamping Away was the whole song for the first couple of days of that song's existence, and I actually decided to introduce a more rocking kind of element to it after a while. So in a way, the essence of the song is the first verse of it. It was Chad's approach to mixing, Chad Blake, who mixed the record, to deliberately pull the volume of the first section back so there'd be more impact for people like yourself.
Well, this is your first solo album. Did you feel like you had to establish yourself again?
A lot of people thought I'd retired after the Sydney Opera House, but I was certain aspects of the circus that we'd embarked on for the last 10 years, I was wondering whether I was really up for it again. So I did have to take a bit of time to kind of re-energise and refocus. There was a part of me that could see myself as a songwriter sitting at the beach, writing songs and making sort of albums with humble aspirations, not really putting a lot of effort into promotional photos or all the other side of things. But pretty soon after that, really, in fact, I was on a painting expedition with my friend Robert Moore from Brisbane, who gave me the best piece of advice after Crowded House broke up. If anybody said, forget music, go to the beach and paint for a couple of weeks. I did that, and it was great because it sort of things crept in through the back door. I didn't have to think about music, but I was still working the same part of my brain. But during the course of that song actually emerged during that time, and I took it as a clue that I'm fairly driven, not just to make music, but to get it out there and spread it as far as possible, and hear it resonate through the times and the places.
What about the lure of fame and fortune, celebrity status?
You're constantly evaluating what your motivations are in this business, whether it's for celebrity or glory, or I would like to believe that there's a fairly pure motivation and behind it all, which is that the songs go off and have a life, and that one day in, say, 10 years' time, somebody will be sitting in a bar singing one of my songs and everyone will be singing it and no one will have a clue who wrote it or where it came from. that's the pure motivation behind it all. There's probably I probably like to soak up the applause from time to time too, but the celebrity aspect of it, I'm not really that driven by. I don't think. I always quite glad for the fact that my life is not of interest to the tabloids. I like to keep it that way, really.
And the debate between live performance and studio recording, do you prefer one to the other?
Oh yeah, live performance is the purest thrill of the lot, really, because it's all no matter what it's like, at the end of the night it's over and you move on. So as far as being in the moment and expressing the here and now, it's the ultimate way that music is. Making albums sometimes is so bogged down in thinking ahead or thinking back or trying to fix up things you've done yesterday or listening to sounds and projecting forward. You actually forget that you're supposed to be performing in the moment. Of course, all the best moments in the studio are when you click into that gear and stop thinking about all the technical side, but there's a lot of things conspiring against that.
Neil, do you have a tick list of the qualities and contents that you want to get into any song that you write?
I'm not sure I've ever sat down and figured out what my A-list is in terms of ingredients, but I would say it has to have some musical surprises in it, a chord that just doesn't go where you think it was going to go, a seamless melody that hooks into your brain, and it has to do that for me first, really, because I don't remember them. If I don't remember them, they don't really rate. Some amount of texture and atmosphere that adds mystery. A lyric that's open-ended enough to suggest rather than bang over the head. And I think a sense of the yin and yang, a little bit of light, a little bit of dark. There's a poet in New Zealand called Sam Hunt. His list is charm, charge and chant. He says if it's got a bit of charm, a bit of charge and a bit of chant, it's all right by him.
Neil, on Try Whistling This, you've collaborated, maybe unusually, with Jim Magini from Midnight Oil. How does that partnership work?
Well, it's a mysterious thing, so a lot of the time it doesn't work, I don't think. Otherwise I'd be doing it all the time. I'm probably less willing to try collaborations than a lot of people I know. There's people who are writing with other people all the time. But I've always been quite protective of that moment of inspiration and find it hard to let my defences down. Jim being an old friend, and we've talked for a long time about getting together. And also he's in a very similar mode to me as a writer. He's interested in beautiful chord changes, elegant melodies, and I think he plays guitar like I'd like to play. He plays like a child, but he's got great technique. And there's always an element of struggle in what he does. So I had a feeling that things would work if we got together, and in fact we went to a great place by the beach that Crowded House recorded at Carry, and had a week with no agenda and jammed and talked music, and a lot of good things came out of it. The sketches of 4 of the songs on the record, in fact. Try Whistling This being the one that was in a way the most intact from how it was written. No matter how self-contained you become as a writer, I think there's a danger that you'll be following the same fixes all the time. A certain chord progression you'll find yourself continually returning to because it does the job for you. But it means that people will point at a song and go, well, that reminds me of a song you wrote 5 years ago. So you're looking for fresh angles, and Jim provided those that week for me, and I think we inspired each other, and he went away with a really enthusiastic feeling about music, and so did I. I should do it more often probably, but there's been a couple on this album, and they're very valuable, rewarding experiences.
The first single from the album is She Will Have Her Way. How do you choose singles, or do you leave that to other people?
I veto singles. I generally am quite open to allowing other people into that decision process, because by the time I've finished a record it's very hard for me to be objective about them, and I figure that a single generally has to obey the rule that it's something that hits people straight away, and that song definitely had an impact on people the first time they heard it, so I was quite happy about that being a single. Well, I'm not at all averse to a bit of dumbass lyric if it's called for, and that song had a Dadu came out with the original idea, and it seemed to be the bit that initially my family would sing around the house, so yeah, sometimes you can just la 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 and it's perfectly okay. I never sort of thought about it along those lines. I never thought, well, I'll stick a really easy to remember dumb kind of thing in there. It just happened.
Neil, do you ever dream songs?
I have dreamed a couple of songs, but I haven't managed to make the transition between dreaming them and wakefulness. In fact, in my dream, when this has happened, I have gone over it and think I must remember this when I wake up. And unfortunately it hasn't happened, but one day they should have little electrodes you can attach by now, I would have thought. I'd like to be able to think that computers will get that good that, well, beyond voice command, which will be an exciting point, I think, for people like me who are not inclined to sit in front of a keyboard. But points where you can actually operate a computer from your brain will be an amazing period. I'll probably never see it.
The closest I get to contentment is when the barrier comes down. It's a line from the song Sinner, and it sounds as though it comes from the heart.
Well, it's a good Catholic line, that one. It's like, when you grow up with the concept of sin, you also grow up with the concept of its attraction. It's enormously attractive. The whole idea, really, even as a kid, the forbidden things. In some ways, you're lucky to grow up as a Catholic with such a regime of forbidden fruit, because it creates a huge enigma and mystery and about the concept of, losing all those rules. But yeah, I mean, line stands on its own. I don't really have to explain that one. I mean, they're open-ended, and as soon as you start to put neat full stops at the end of things, I think you're limiting. I always prefer people's interpretations. Apparently there's a website, and I haven't seen it, where people discuss my lyrics. I'll have to have a look sometime, because apparently it's pretty hilarious. There's some amazing convoluted explanations. I remember, although when I tapped into one of the websites, they were discussing a kind of a guttural noise that I made at the end of a fade of one song, and trying to figure out whether I was actually saying anything. Of course, I know I wasn't, but there were some amazing interpretations.
Tell us about how that song come about.
It's a bit about everything. I think songs are usually better when they're describing several scenarios at once. I always think of the parties that my parents used to have when I was a kid at the beach, and the way everybody would sing at them, and by the end of the night, priests would be flirting with my aunties, and there'd be this sense of abandon would suddenly creep into proceedings, and music was always the catalyst for that, as well as, I suppose, a little bit of alcohol thrown in there. But those barriers, which and Sunday Mass seemed quite strict, and would suddenly disappear in these kind of settings, and so that was the inspiration for that line, really. Within families is every experience that you can have in life, and within the confines of a home also, I think there's a lot of people I know who've pursued a very wide experience in their life and actually chased sensation after sensation, and had no real responsibilities, no family, no ties, and at times there's a temptation to look enviously upon that sort of freedom, but then in some ways I think that you experience life in a more deep way by making connections and actually having strong relationships, because it forces you to consider things from somebody else's perspective all the time. Whatever the downside of guilt is, and there is a downside to it, the upside is that you have a sense of responsibility to other people and a sense of conscience and feeling like there's a value system is worth having. So I'm grateful for it. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I sort of also the imagery of growing up with benediction and all those great images and incense and Latin Mass, I think it's buried deep, and there's a sense of wonder that was brought to the surface.
Now, there's a really weird track called Twisty Bass, and near the end it sounds as though you say, "The horse ate my trousers." Is that right?
It is. It's definitely one out of the bag. It was one that came together when I first got my computer downstairs in my studio. I got a friend of mine who actually knew how to work it, and that was the first thing I did on it, which was a few guitar loops and a bass line, hence the name. And it was worked on steadily through the proceedings of the record, but I became very fond of it because it actually came from a completely different place than anything I'd ever done before. So there is part of the vocal on Twisty Bass which is a distorted freeform kind of, I'd hesitate to say a rap, but it's about the closest I've ever come to one. And that came from opening my book randomly and with a microphone and just spewing out all these words, and the last line happened to be, "Your eyes danced in my reflection and the horse ate my trousers." And that actually happened at a wedding that my wife and I went to. We went out for a walk in the middle of it and into the middle of a paddock, and this horse came after us a bit too enthusiastically and started to chew my trousers. So as in all things, it's kind of absurdist, but it has an origin. In fact, the first time I sang that song is the vocal that's on there. It was a one-off all out last ditch effort to get a vocal on it.
Now, which quality wins out in your composition? Is it craft or inspiration?
I prefer to do everything live if possible, but there is times where graft is necessary and has a good result, so I got no set rules. In terms of vocals, I often go back on my first or second attempt when I felt I've learnt the song through having listened to it a fair bit and got used to the words, to see whether there's more I can pull out of the vocal. And it often has a good result. In fact, usually has a good result. All the drums came through in quite different ways, actually. There's a few tracks that are very live, and we remain faithful to the slapdash nature of the way they went down. In many cases, to achieve that level of looseness, we actually worked quite hard in the computer and actually looped things up. And my prime concern in using a computer was not to get more sophisticated or more slick, was to maintain a fairly garage aesthetic. I mean, it's certainly not a garage record. There's a sophistication to the way the tunes are arranged, but I think I actually was inspired by and enthused by the way that Beck put together his last record, which is obviously computer derived, a lot of it, but still manages to sound like people having fun, and there's a roughness in the aesthetic. Prior to that, I didn't really think computers were going to be that useful to me, because my inclination is to craft anyway, and I thought they'll probably make a really sophisticated adult sounding record. I made a breakthrough in using computers for the first time on this record, because I actually figured out how to make it sound like it was all over the place.
Neil, can you tell us about the song Astro?
Now, that song is definitely a song where the overall lyric doesn't have a clear thread, but there's certain lines in it which to me I'm very fond of. All Your Best One-Liners, borrowed from a film, seemed incredibly appropriate to me when that popped out, because at the time, I think it was Wayne's World, it was probably well after Wayne's World came out, but those kind of movies have produced a whole series of buzz expressions and words into the community, and I know people whose entire conversation revolves around lines from films. So it's nice when you get a line that resonates like that. That's the attraction, and the drive is provided by the whimsical notion that people and places are resonating to the sound of my music, and I can't, I'm totally addicted to that concept. I count my blessings every day. I curse it half the time, but I do. I'm very lucky.
Do you miss the days of being in a group, the days of Split Enz and Crowded House?
Not really, no. No, I don't miss. I have very fond memories of both bands, and they're etched in my brain forever, and my whole set of values has been informed by that experience. And but I don't miss it, no, because I think at both times when the bands finished, I felt it was right, and I would really not want to go through life regretting those kind of decisions, because they're made with a lot of responsibility and seriousness at the time. Difficult for the fraternal relationship. Is harder to maintain through that than the band relationship. I think all things bow to the band, including, fraternal relationships.
So being in a group can cause difficulties for family members, yet your son Liam is working with you. Will that be a problem?
No, I think it'll be fine. He's got such an amazingly good attitude to music, and I'm not sure whether it's because he's been standing off to the side watching things go down, but his attitude in the studio is brilliant. He's relaxed. He takes direction. He doesn't stress, and he's relentless until it's right. So I'd imagine he's going to have the same attributes on stage. It'll be good. I sometimes fret that I'm pushing him into an inherited set of values, much the same as I pushed into Split Enz and had this whole aesthetic that I learnt from them, when perhaps it might be better for him to discover his own. But I think you can think about these things too much, and it actually at the moment feels very natural and very easy. So I sort of think it's a huge blessing for me to have my son have a natural talent, and I never pushed him into it at all. He was obsessed with playing instruments from just about the day he was born. He was bashing drums when he was 2 years old. So, and he's good. He's got a feel for it, and he's writing good songs. But and he's actually wise enough now to have realised the things that have caused me stress: the meet and greets, the endless photo sessions. He keeps saying things like, "I'm not going to do those." Not to say he won't be drawn into it, but he's got quite a wise attitude to it.
Well, in the end, you like and write sad songs best, don't you?
When I was 14 years old, I used to listen to records, and the songs I always went for were the sad ones and the dark ones and the ones with a sense of yearning about them. And I think before I understood what the lyrics were about, it was an atmosphere or a mood I was relating to, and perhaps I sort of feel that in order to make a deep connection with people, you've got to stroke that side of them, you've got to get underneath their skin to the point where they're yearning for something. And I think they offer, at that point you can offer them hope, both because they relate, they can share that feeling with somebody, but also I'd like to think most of the songs I have are certainly not dark, gratuitously dark. They've got some light in them as well. If you can do both things in a song, it's a great success, I think. People have been saying it for a long time about what I do, and I sometimes vainly try and deny that I'm writing sad songs, but they are, I suppose. I like sad chord sequences and owning up to it. Writing, performing and owning up to it, I think that's the least you can do, really. At the end of the day, the minute you step out on a stage or in front of a camera, you're owning up to it. That's what we used to say in Crowded House. We've made a record now, we've got to go and own up to it.